Welcome to Baha'i On Air. We're doing another deep dive into the Baha'i writings.
I'm Mark.
And I'm Jane. We're jumping back into our series, Spiritual Deepenings.
Yes, where we really take a close look at some profound spiritual texts.
We try to unpack them, right? Get into the history, the meaning, and, what they might mean for you listening today.
Exactly. And today's deep dive, it's a really significant one.
What are we looking at?
We're focusing on a letter written back in 1933 by Shoghi Effendi, who was the guardian of the Baha'i Faith.
Okay.
And it was addressed to the Baha'is in the U.S. and Canada. The title is America and the Most Great Peace.
America and the Most Great Peace.
Wow, okay. That title alone, it sort of hints at something big, doesn't it? Maybe unexpected, connecting a nation to like a global peace vision.
It definitely does. So our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to really unpack this document.
Right.
We want to get into its meaning, the specific time it was written, the incredible symbolism and imagery that Shoghi Effendi uses.
Yeah, his writing is often full of that. It really is. We'll trace the history it talks about, figure out its purpose, who it was for, and crucially, why it still feels so relevant, today.
Absolutely. Sounds like a rich text.
Oh, it is. It's packed with history, prophecy, guidance. Maybe just to give everyone a feel for it, you could read the very beginning.
Sure thing. Let me pull it up here. Okay. Reads, 40 years will have elapsed ere the close of this coming summer since the name of Baha'u'llah was first mentioned on the American continent.
Mm-hmm.
Continues reading, strange indeed must appear to every observer pondering in his heart the significance of so great a landmark in the spiritual history of the great American Republic, the circumstances which have attended this first public reference to the author of our beloved faith. Strangers still must seem the associations which the brief words uttered on that historic occasion must have evoked in the minds of those who heard them.
Keep going. It sets the scene so well.
Continues reading. Of pomp and circumstance, of any manifestations of public rejoicing or of popular applause, there were none to greet this first intimation to America's citizens of the existence and purpose of the revelation proclaimed by Baha'u'llah. Nor did he who was its chosen instrument profess himself a believer in the indwelling potency of the tidings he conveyed.
Wow. Right there, those first lines, you just get this immediate sense of contrast, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. A huge spiritual landmark, he calls it, but introduced with, zero fanfare.
Exactly. Almost like, accidentally mentioned by someone who wasn't even fully convinced themselves at the time.
It sets a really interesting tone, doesn't it? Like, this isn't about worldly power or some big launch event. It's quieter, more organic, humble beginnings.
Precisely. So let's ground ourselves in that foundation the letter lays out. Who actually wrote it? We know it's Shoghi Effendi. But who was he writing to? And why that date, April 21st, 1933? Why is that date important?
Good questions.
Well, the author, Shoghi Effendi, he was the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, appointed in the will and testament of Abdu'l-Bahá.
Who is the son of Baha'u'llah, the founder.
Correct. And he's writing specifically to the Baha'i communities in the United States and Canada.
Okay.
And the date, April 21st, 1933, that marks exactly 40 years since Baha'u'llah's name was first publicly mentioned in North America.
And that was at the World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago, 1893, right?
That's the one. A really groundbreaking event for its time, bringing all these different faiths together.
Yeah, amazing for the 1890s. But even then, the mention of the Baha'i Faith wasn't like a major headline.
Not at all. And Shoghi Effendi really emphasizes that the lack of pomp. It wasn't some big planned reveal.
Right.
It was just a brief reference made by a Reverend Henry Jessup during his talk.
Yeah.
He'd encountered the faith in the Middle East, but like the letter says, he didn't yet profess himself a believer in the indwelling potency of what he was sharing.
So the first mention came from someone outside the faith, almost.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And initially, many people just saw it as, some obscure offshoot of a contemptible creed, coming from a part of the world that was often misunderstood.
That quiet start makes the rest of the story, the journey the letter describes, even more striking. Because it wasn't just obscurity they faced, was it? The letter talks about really intense challenges.
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't pull any punches. It speaks of unceasing trial.
Right.
And these weren't just minor hurdles. Shoghi Effendi lists things like defection, malice, treachery, ridicule, abuse, calumny. Imagine trying to build a community with that constantly coming at you.
Yeah, that's a lot. And the external opposition, the stuff from outside the community, sounds particularly nasty in paragraph 5. He says enemies vied with one another to hurl the vilest imputations, What kind of things were they accused of?
It's quite a list, covering almost every base, really. They were accused of nihilism, denying all values. Heresy, obviously. Mohammedan Gnosticism, linking it to something seen as obscure or negative within Islam.
Right, kind of painting it as foreign and weird.
Exactly. Also, immorality, a classic attack. Occultism, associating it with dark or secret stuff.
Mm.
And even communism, which was a big fear then, linking its unity principles to radical politics.
Wow, so they were hit from religious, moral, social, and political angles all at once.
Pretty much. It wasn't just one kind of attack. It was like a full-spectrum assault on their legitimacy.
And it wasn't just name-calling, right? Their actual teachings were dismissed, too.
Completely. Their principles were called defective. The program was fantastic. The vision, chimerical, like illusory or deceitful.
Mm.
The doctrine was just idle dogma. The administration, which became so important later, was misunderstood. Spiritual mysteries were just superstition. Unity was suspicious, seen as mere uniformity. Divine help was magic. And the whole ideal for the future, just utopia, pure fantasy.
So intellectual dismissal, religious attack, political suspicions, social slander. That's a huge wall of negativity for a new community.
It really is. And as if that wasn't enough, the letter stresses they also face serious internal problems.
Right, the internal strife.
Yeah, crises and severe shocks coming from within. Things like the defection of the faint in heart, people who just couldn't take the pressure.
Understandable, maybe.
Sure. But also the malice of the mischief maker, people actively causing trouble, and the treachery of the proud and the ambitious, those looking for personal power or gain.
That sounds painful.
And later, the letter goes into more detail about an even bigger crisis involving someone referred to as an apostate, a prominent early figure who turned against Abdu'l-Bahá and actually joined forces with the archenemy.
The archenemy. That sounds serious. That refers to the main covenant breaker, right?
Okay.
Someone challenging the leadership after Baha'u'llah.
Exactly. It adds this layer of spiritual conflict to the internal problems. So yeah, this community was basically under siege from outside hostility and internal division and betrayal. It paints a really tough picture.
It absolutely does. And yet, and this is the crucial part, the letter says that despite all this, the community succeeded in driving its roots deep into America's genial soil.
That phrase, genial soil, is interesting. It suggests maybe there was something receptive about America itself, despite all the opposition.
Yeah, like fertile ground somehow?
Right. And it didn't just put down roots, it sent out shoots and tendrils as far as the remotest corners of the globe. So it had this inherent outward energy. And critically, within those first 40 years, this young American community achieved undisputed leadership among all Baha'i communities worldwide.
That's the incredible part. Facing that level of opposition, starting from practically nothing, how do you not just survive, but become the leading community globally in 4 decades? The letter must attribute that to something beyond just human effort.
It definitely does. And that leads us right into the profound prophetic vision the document talks about, especially concerning America. Paragraph 7 brings up this historical parallel.
Ah, the comparison to early Christianity and Islam.
Exactly. The letter suggests this pattern you can see in past religions. The divine impulse of a new revelation starts in the East, its birthplace, but often finds a more propitious clime, better conditions, in the West to really flourish and spread its energy.
Like the energy moves.
Yeah. He mentions how Christianity started in Palestine, but really centered and thrived in Europe, finding, as he puts it, superior valor and trained efficiency there. And Islam, born in Arabia, saw its fairest fruit, its civilization, bloom far from its origin.
So the spiritual center of gravity can shift.
That's the idea.
Right.
And Abdu'l-Bahā's own words, quoted a lot in the letter, really hammer this home for the Baha'i faith. He says explicitly that while the East is the dawning place of the Sun of Truth,
where the prophets appeared.
Right. The illumination thus shed hath, however, acquired in the West an extraordinary brilliancy. He doesn't mince words about it.
And he gets even more direct about that shift, promising a kind of reversal, almost.
He does. He's quoted saying things like, "Ere long ye will with your own eyes witness how brilliantly every one of you will radiate in the firmament of your country the light of divine guidance."
Wow.
And even more starkly, the day is approaching when ye shall witness how, through the splendor of the faith of Baha'u'llah, the West will have replaced the East, radiating the light of divine guidance. It's this vision of the lamp lit in the East, now shining, extra brightly in the West.
And within the West, America specifically gets this really unique prominent role in Abdu'l-Bahá's vision, according to the letter. The quotes about America's destiny are, well, they're pretty amazing.
They really are. Abdu'l-Bahá called America the land wherein the splendors of his light shall be revealed,
Okay.
the place where the mysteries of his faith shall be unveiled, where the righteous will abide and the free assemble. This isn't just general praise. It's assigning America a specific, vital role in how the Baha'i message unfolds, a place where the deepest truths can really take root and be shown.
And it's not just about receiving the light, right? It's about actually leading the charge for global peace.
Exactly. The vision sees America as the first nation to establish international agreement, the first to proclaim the unity of mankind, and the first to unfurl the standard of the most great peace.
That's a huge statement.
It is. It sees America as not just having the potential, but being equipped and empowered for this massive world-changing task. It's a vision of national spiritual leadership on a global scale.
And that leadership is tied to America becoming a source of spiritual light for the whole world.
Yes, Abdu'l-Bahá talks about America becoming the distributing center of spiritual enlightenment.
A distributing center.
Yeah, its people transformed, becoming like angels of heaven. He says its influence will be far-reaching, and it will lead all nations spiritually. This suggests a kind of transformation where America's global influence shifts from just material power or democratic ideals to spreading spiritual light and unity.
And Shoghi Effendi connects this vision back to Baha'u'llah himself, confirming this East-West idea.
He does. He quotes Baha'u'llah. "In the East, the light of his revelation hath broken. In the West have appeared the signs of his dominion."
Okay, break that down. The light breaking in the East.
That's the coming of the prophet himself, the source of the revelation.
Got it. And the signs of his dominion appearing in the West.
That refers to the establishment of his influence, the power of his faith taking root, starting to shape the world. Especially through the Baha'i administration, the structures built on his teachings and Abdu'l-Bahā's will. It fits perfectly with that vision of the spiritual impulse moving west to find its kind of practical expression and global impact.
That's really potent imagery. The sun dawns in the East, but its power, its effective rule, its dominion shows up in the West. And this whole vision of America's spiritual destiny is set against the backdrop of the world in 1933, which paragraph 14 describes in pretty stark terms. What was that picture like?
It's grim, really unflinching. Shoghi Effendi talks about a world writhing with pain and declining into chaos.
Yeah.
Experiencing dreadful convulsions, internecine conflicts, conflicts within nations, petty disputes, outworn controversies, interminable revolutions.
Sounds chaotic.
It does. He describes disintegrating institutions, discredited statesmanship, exploded theories, appalling degradation, a world just consumed by its own follies and furies, relying on shifts, shams, and compromises.
And that really echoes the history, right? 1933, deep in the Great Depression, fascism rising in Europe, tensions building towards World War II, a real sense of systems failing.
Absolutely. And the letter deliberately, right away, contrasts this global mess with the state of the Baha'i community, especially in America.
Okay, so what was the contrast?
He talks about their rising fortunes, not materially, but spiritually and institutionally. They were surrounded by the calm new light of peace and of truth. While the world was falling apart, they were experiencing steady consolidation.
Building, not breaking down.
Exactly. Guided by holy discipline, showing unity and cohesiveness, having assured conviction, uncompromising loyalty, and capable of heroic self-sacrifice.
It's presenting the Baha'i community as this kind of model, almost.
Yeah.
An island of order in a sea of chaos.
That's exactly the feeling. And this contrast isn't just descriptive, it's key to what the document means for Baha'is.
How so?
Well, it gives the American Baha'is this profound identity and responsibility. They're not just followers, they're valiant inheritors of the law and love of Baha'u'llah. They're faithful stewards and harbingers of the Golden Age. Their whole journey over those first 40 years is shown as proof they can fulfill this role, and their responsibility is huge. In a wounded world, they need to heal its wounds, restore its confidence, and revive its shattered hopes.
That's a massive calling. It means their faith isn't just personal. It's meant to actively tackle humanity's big problems.
That's the implication. And how does this vision, America and the Most Great Peace, speak to the wider world beyond the Baha'is?
What's the relevance there?
Well, it offers a perspective. It basically argues that the chaos of 1933, and you could say the chaos we still see today, the division, conflict, materialism, it comes from ignoring fundamental spiritual principles.
Right.
The vision of America raising the banner of the most great peace suggests that real, lasting peace isn't just politics. It needs a spiritual foundation, recognizing human unity, establishing justice, changing ourselves.
And the history in the letter, that 40-year journey, serves as kind of proof.
Yeah, like a case study. It shows that even a small, obscure group facing huge opposition can, through spiritual principles, unity, and hard work, not just survive, but actually help build the foundations for something new.
It offers some hope then, showing that pockets of light can grow even when things seem dark.
Exactly. It suggests peace starts by cultivating those qualities: unity, service, justice within a community, and then radiating them out.
This historical journey, those 40 years from 1893 to 1933, is so central to understanding how they got there. Shoghi Effendi breaks it down into 4 10-year periods, right?
He does, yeah. A very clear structure showing the progression. The first decade, 1893 to 1903, he calls a time of slow and steady fermentation.
Fermentation, like things were just starting to bubble up.
Kind of. Right after that quiet mention at the Parliament, people were learning about the faith, communities were forming, very early days.
And the big event capping that period was the pilgrimages to the Holy Land.
Yes, that was crucial. Remember, Baha'u'lláh passed in 1892, and Abdu'l-Bahá became the center of the covenant. But this period also saw the first major internal challenge the covenant breaking started, trying to usurp authority.
Right, the archenemy mentioned earlier.
Exactly. So when these early Westerners made the difficult journey to visit Abdu'l-Bahá, it was a huge act of loyalty. Shoghi Effendi says these pilgrimages fired the souls of the believers, and importantly, they helped clarify the splendor of the covenant in America when it was being attacked.
So the trips weren't just spiritual boosts, they actively helped defend the faith's unity and leadership. The letter says their arrival helped lift the gloom for Abdu'l-Bahá's family, too.
Yeah, it shows the personal support they provided during a really tough time. Shoghi Effendi named some key early figures: Louis Gessinger, Howard McNutt, Arthur P. Dodge people, whose memory, he says, will forever remain associated with this foundational time.
Okay, so that's the first decade. Then the second, 1903 to 1913, is marked by tests and trials. This is where that internal conflict really blew up.
It did. This is when the individual Shoghi Effendi calls Bahá's Peter, like the apostle, but implying a negative outcome, or the apostate, launched his open attack on Abdu'l-Bahá.
And this was someone respected, someone close.
Yes, which made it harder. The letter says he was driven by pride and ambition, and he actually allied himself with the main covenant breaker in the East.
What did his attack involve?
Trying to undermine Abdu'l-Bahā's authority, twisting the teachings, and just relentless vilification against Abdu'l-Bahá. It causes serious yet transitory cleavage, a split in the American community, a real test of loyalty.
How did Abdu'l-Bahá handle that from afar?
Strategically. The letter says he sent messengers from the East to America, important figures like Mirza Abul Fadl, to teach, clarify, defend the covenant, and basically support the believers.
Okay.
And Shoghi Effendi sees this Abdu'l-Bahá sending representatives as foreshadowing the emergence of the Baha'i administration. Like, the need for clear authority in response to division was already shaping things.
So even that painful test helped lay groundwork for the future structure. And the high point of this tough decade, the happy climax, was Abdu'l-Bahá actually visiting America in 1912.
Yes, his memorable visit. It's described as a triumphal progress. He traveled all over, speaking everywhere: homes, churches, synagogues, universities.
That's been incredible.
The letter says his presence, his words, released forces that were transformative. And interestingly, it also excited opposition, showing his message really challenged people. Shoghi Effendi points to the symbolic functions he performed as being super important.
Like what? What symbolic acts?
Well, the biggest one was laying the cornerstone for the Mashriq al-Adkar, the house of worship, in Wilmette, near Chicago.
The temple.
Right, which wasn't just about a building. It symbolized laying the foundation for a whole new kind of community life. He also did things like serve the believers himself at a feast, showing humility, and powerfully emphasized his own station as the center of the covenant.
Okay.
The letter interprets these acts as Abdu'l-Bahá deliberately bequeathing the essentials of that spiritual heritage to the American believers, basically investing them with spiritual primacy.
Giving them the tools and the mandate. And he left them with a message using farming metaphors, right?
Yes, exactly. He called himself the plowman who'd prepared the ground in America. Divine help was the rain, the trials they faced. Those were the deep furrows needed to prepare the soil. And the seeds he scattered were his teachings, his plan for America, the spiritual energy he released.
But he also warned them about hard times coming after he left.
He did. He predicted a winter of unprecedented severity for the world, a clear nod to World War I, which broke out just 2 years later and really disrupted everything. He talked about storm clouds and tempestuous winds.
Scary prediction.
Yeah, but the metaphor didn't end there. He promised this wintry desolation wouldn't last. The dormant seed he planted would eventually burst forth, watered by vernal showers, new divine help, and grow into mighty institutions, a mighty tree with golden fruit. It's this beautiful image of resilience, growth through hardship, and the eventual emergence of a new order.
That's powerful. Okay, so that brings us to the third period, 1913 to 1923. This sounds like a calmer decade.
Relatively, yes. The letter calls it a time of quiet and uninterrupted consolidation. After the big tests, the master's visit, the seeds planted, the community focused inward, building strength, starting to formalize things.
And the key outcome was the birth of that divinely appointed administration.
Yes, based on the principles in Abdu'l-Bahá's will and testament, which would be fully revealed at the end of this period, after his passing in 1921.
So the structures started forming even before they had the full blueprint from the will.
Kind of. Shoghi Effendi points out that the American believers had already started creating things in response to earlier challenges like the House of Spirituality, which evolved into assemblies.
Okay.
The Publishing Society, Green Acre Center, the Star of the West magazine, the National Convention, the Baha'i Temple Unity for the Temple Project. These early structures, he says, weathered storms and became the practical foundation for the administrative order when the will was fully known.
Got it. And the fourth period, 1923-1933, the decade leading right up to this letter.
This one saw further internal development and, importantly, a notable expansion of international activities. The American community was really starting to step onto the world stage, fulfilling that vision.
And the big physical achievement was the temple.
Yes, the completion of the superstructure of the Mashriq al-Aqsa in Wilmette.
The main building went up.
Right. The letter calls it the administration's mighty bulwark, its stronghold, a symbol of its strength and the sign of its future glory. For Shoghi Effendi, finishing this unique building wasn't just architecture. It was a visible sign of the American community's spiritual and administrative progress, their crowning glory, a mystic chain connecting them to the faith center.
This whole 40-year story, then, isn't just history. It's presented as this guided process, showing how they were trained through trials to build these foundational institutions for a new world.
Exactly. And that leads right into the discussion of the Baha'i administration itself and America's really unique role in it, which the letter covers in paragraphs 32 to 37.
Right. How does he describe the birth of the administration?
He says quite powerfully that it was born from the pangs of anguish after Abdu'l-Bahá passed away in 1921, and amidst ongoing attacks. It wasn't dreamt up in comfort. It was forged in hardship, answering the urgent need for guidance and unity after the center of the covenant was gone. The letter says the potent energies released through the ascension of Abdu'l-Bahá crystallized into this supreme, this infallible organ.
Supreme, infallible organ. That's strong, emphasizing its divine source and importance. And Abdu'l-Bahā's will and testament was the key to that crystallization.
Absolutely. The letter presents the will as the charter for this administrative order. It unveiled its character, reaffirmed its basis, supplemented its principles, asserted its indispensability, and enumerated its chief institutions, like the Universal House of Justice and the Guardianship. It laid out the whole blueprint.
And America's specific role in getting this administration up and running.
This is where the letter puts a huge weight on the American Baha'is. It says they responded to the call to build this administration with the same spontaneity and dedication they'd shown earlier in embracing the faith.
Right.
Shoghi Effendi states it was given to America, and to her alone, in those initial turbulent years after 1921, to become the fearless champion of that administration.
Wow, to her alone.
Yeah, to be the pivot of its newborn institutions and the leading promoter of its influence. They essentially got the primary job of establishing this new system and showing how it worked.
That's a huge responsibility.
It is. Shoghi Effendi even compares their role to the Persian martyrs who gave their lives. He says the American believers were worthily succeeding those martyrs, but now winning a victory not through death, but through loyalty, unity, and tireless effort to build the administration.
And they were still facing attacks even while doing this building work, internal dissent still.
Oh yeah, building the administration didn't stop the opposition. The letter mentions ongoing whisperings of the treacherous, people focused on sordid pursuit of earthly riches, deluded enthusiasts twisting things, even a specific case of a besotted woman flouting the will, plus a continued attacks from that perfidious enemy.
But their commitment to the administration kept them going.
That's the point the letter makes. Their unswerving loyalty to the will and testament, their refusal to let these attacks deface Abdu'l-Bahá's noble handiwork, allow them to push through. Safe within their growing administrative structures, they scorned his insinuations and shattered his hopes. The administration itself became a shield.
And during this time, facing these things, they still managed these magnificent accomplishments that boosted America's standing in the Baha'i world. What were some of those achievements listed in paragraphs 36 and 37?
It's quite a list, showing their leadership. First, they were pioneers in actually making the administration work. They were the first Baha'i community anywhere to devise, promulgate, and legalize the essential instruments, setting up the local and national councils, the spiritual assemblies, and getting them legally recognized. This created a pattern for others to follow.
So they were literally writing the manual on how to implement this system in a modern country.
Pretty much. They also set up national endowments, securing the financial base for the community's work. They created agencies to handle property and affairs. And internationally, they had a big impact. They gave crucial moral support and helped to persecuted Baha'is in Egypt, helping them gain recognition against orthodox pressure.
And helped believers elsewhere, too.
Yes. Their effective and timely intervention helped Baha'is facing dangers in the Soviet republics, which was tough. And for the Persian Baha'is facing constant hardship, America's wholehearted assistance, advocacy, financial aid saved lives, reduced suffering, and curbed attacks through publicity and appeals.
And there was that legal case involving the house in Baghdad.
Right. A sacred house associated with Baha'u'llah was seized. The American community was key in taking this issue to the top international body then, the League of Nations Permanent Mandates Commission. One of America's most distinguished representatives, likely a Baha'i lawyer, presented the case. And they got a resolution recommending the British, who had the mandate for Iraq, push the Iraqi government for immediate redress. This got written statements recognizing the Baha'i claim, and importantly, implicitly gave the faith an independent religious status internationally.
That's huge, using international law to defend the faith's rights and identity.
A major step in gaining global recognition. Another thing highlighted is getting powerful public endorsements, especially from Queen Marie of Romania.
The Queen.
Yeah. She gave this really moving statement, quoted in the letter, about how the Baha'i teachings brought peace and understanding, embraced all prophets, didn't destroy other faiths, and showed the real spirit of Christ, unity instead of strife, hope instead of condemnation, love instead of hate.
Having royalty say that publicly must have been massive for credibility back then.
Huge. Shoghi Effendi calls it remarkable and repeated testimony. He also mentions an American Baha'i helping remove barriers for Baha'is in Persia. And finally, the growing number of American Baha'is becoming pioneers, moving to places like Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, Australia, actively spreading the faith globally, just as Abdu'l-Bahá had envisioned.
Looking at that whole list, creating the admin structure, endowments, defending others, legal wins, royal testimony, pioneering it really shows how by 1933, they had genuinely earned that undisputed leadership title through real action.
Exactly. It wasn't passive. It was earned through service, sacrifice, and successfully putting the faith's principles and administration into practice.
And throughout this whole discussion, the symbolism and imagery Shoghi Effendi uses really stands out. It's not just history, it's layered with this spiritual language.
Absolutely. He weaves this rich tapestry of metaphors, we've mentioned some, spiritual history, the faith's indwelling potency. The administration is a mighty organ guided by the hand of omnipotence. The move west is a swing of the pendulum, a divine impulse.
The faith is the sun of truth. Its teachings the splendors of his light. America is where mysteries unveiled. The tabernacle of the great peace is built, the standard of the most great peace raised. Believers become angels of heaven, America the distributing center of spiritual enlightenment.
Right. And the covenant is the ark, sailing through troublesome seas of ceaseless tribulation to the promised haven. The community's resilience is phoenix-like. The farming metaphors are so strong. America, the fertile field, Abdu'l-Bahá, the plowman, trials, the deep furrows, divine aid, the vernal showers, growth, the mighty tree with golden fruit.
And building the community uses architecture and even military images. The admin is a stronghold with pillars. The temple is the crowning glory, a mighty bulwark, a mystic chain. Believers are an advancing army with indomitable energy, setting up outposts that form a girdle of shining glory around the earth.
This language is so important because it frames everything as divinely guided, not just human effort. Challenges aren't random. They're tests that strengthen and refine. The administration isn't just organization. It's the essential arc needed to carry the message and build peace. The imagery makes it all feel tangible and spiritually significant.
So bringing this back to relevance then and now, that stark contrast in paragraph 14 between the chaotic world and the consolidating Baha'i community, that's more than just an observation, isn't it?
Oh, it's central. In 1933, the world was drowning in the results of ignoring spiritual principles: nationalism, economic collapse, prejudice, conflict. The Baha'i community, by showing unity, loyalty to a global vision, sacrifice, offered a living alternative.
Right.
They were, as Shoghi Effendi put it, the vanguard of the liberating forces of Baha'u'llah, proving that another way was possible, one with steady consolidation, the holy discipline, the unity and cohesiveness, the assured conviction, the uncompromising loyalty, the heroic self-sacrifice.
A glimpse of a healthier future.
Exactly. And for Baha'is, especially in America, this gives them a huge identity and responsibility. Their purpose is tied to healing the world's problems. Being an inheritor of the law and love of Baha'u'llah means applying those principles to change society. Being a harbinger of the Golden Age isn't just a nice title. It's a call to serve to heal its wounds, restore its confidence, and revive its shattered hopes.
So it demands active participation in building that alternative model. And that relevance clearly extends to today's challenges.
Absolutely. We still see division, conflict, materialism, failing institutions, uncertainty everywhere. The vision of America raising the standard of the most great peace still offers this timeless idea. Real peace needs spiritual roots. It needs unity, justice, spiritual transformation.
And the history in the letter is like proof it can be done.
Yeah, proof of concept. Even in dark times, a unified, committed group can build foundations for a better future and have an impact much bigger than their numbers.
So the document is really this powerful call to action, grounded in history, guided by prophecy. For someone listening now, what does this suggest about their own role in working for peace and unity?
It suggests those core principles, unity, loyalty, discipline, sacrifice, service, aren't just history. They're what's needed now for anyone wanting to make a constructive difference. It means seeing that building a better world starts inside us and radiates out through our efforts to create unity and apply spiritual principles wherever we are, even in small ways. It's about being part of that steady consolidation, showing that calm new light of peace and of truth through action.
And the letter doesn't end with celebrating the past, does it? It looks ahead from 1933 and acknowledges how much work was still left.
No, Shoghi Effendi is very clear. 40 years of achievement, yes, but the job was far from done. He lists the huge tasks remaining, using that same symbolic language. The edifice of the administration needed clothing, more development. The Universal House of Justice was yet unbuilt. The laws needed for a new civilization were mostly undisclosed and needed applying. The standard of the most great peace was yet to be unfurled globally. Mankind's unity was far from being yet established, and the global administrative system for all this, not even created.
It's a very sobering reality check. The first 40 years were foundational, but just the start of something enormous.
Exactly. And he ends that part with a direct, almost challenging question to the American community. Given everything they've received, will they let others surpass them in tackling these remaining tasks, or will they keep building on their unique spiritual heritage? Will they maintain that spiritual primacy?
And the very last lines really bring it all together.
They're incredibly powerful. Her past has been a testimony to the inexhaustible vitality of her faith. May not her future confirm it.
Wow.
It sums it all up. The history proves the faith's vitality. The future is posed as a question, an opportunity, a challenge. Will that vitality keep showing up in the ongoing work for the most great peace?
This deep dive into America and the most great peace, it's really revealed it as so much more than just history. It's this profound story of resilience, building institutions, and this sweeping vision for a nation's role in global peace.
Yeah, it places the struggles and wins of one community within this huge divinely guided plan, contrasting their growth with a world-facing breakdown.
It really underscores that the path to a peaceful world is fundamentally spiritual, needing loyalty, unity, discipline, tireless work, especially when things are tough.
And it defines the identity and job of anyone who resonates with this vision, calling them to be active players in making spiritual principles real for everyone.
It definitely makes you think about that incredible history, that vision of America and the most great peace. So given everything we've talked about, the challenges, the resilience, the vision, the work still ahead, maybe the question for you listening is, what part might you play in seeing that vision unfold, not just in America, but globally? How do these ideas of overcoming opposition, building unity, working for peace connect with what you're doing in your own life, your own community?
That's a great question to sit with. And, our deep dive today looked closely at just this one specific, really foundational document. But the Baha'i writings are vast, a whole ocean of texts, letters, themes.
Right.
So if there are other passages, other letters, maybe other topics from the Baha'i writings that you'd find interesting for us to explore in future Spiritual Deepenings episodes, we would absolutely love to hear your suggestions.
Yeah, please let us know. What are you curious about? What texts would you like to see us unpack together? And of course, make sure you're subscribed to The Deep Dive wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our next exploration.
Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Until next time.